All right, good morning. This is Tommy Spalding, and welcome to our third Heart-Led Leader webinar series for the Club Managers Association of Florida. It is March 2nd, Ash Wednesday. We're so excited about kicking off this third series, and we have a very special guest, Catie Hargrove, who I'm going to introduce in just a bit. You know, when I hear other speakers on the speaking circuit, and at the end of their speech, they say, "I love you," I always think that's so full of it. Like, you don't actually love them. Why do you say that? I don't think it's very sincere when I hear those words. But I think everyone that knows my heart knows how much I truly do love the Florida club managers and the entire association, and Beth Sargent, my partner in crime. And when you love people and you truly care about an association, you want to share your friends. So this third webinar series is 6 more of my friends that we're going to be doing this 6-month part Heart-Led Leader webinar series, kicking off with Catie. Then on April 13th, we have JJ French. Yes, he's the lead guitarist and the founder of Twisted Sister, an 80s rock metal band, but he's brilliantly smart. You're going to love him. April 13th. May 4th, we have Chip Connolly, who is an executive chairman of Airbnb and took that company public. July 6th is my mentor, my dear friend and confidant, Ken Blanchard, who wrote The 1 Minute Manager, greatest business book ever written. August 10th is Tim Sanders, former executive of Yahoo, who wrote Love is a Killer app. He's just an incredible speaker. And then I'm honored to wrap us up on September 7th with The Gift of Influence, the new book that's coming out on September 20th. I get a chance to introduce our webinar host today, Catie Hargrove. And Catie is first of all, she's just a dear friend who I truly love. And it's a perfect story of sometimes how teachers become of their students actually become their teachers. I first met Catie years ago when she was running the leadership development for Booz Allen, which is one of the world's largest consulting companies with 50,000 consultants. She was running their leadership development. She hired me to come in and speak to their organization years ago, and I really saw her talent. I invited her to a Heart-Led Leader retreat, which she attended years ago, and she was a student then. Today, I am her student. She is by far one of the smartest women I've ever met. She is brilliant, and what her expertise is emotional intelligence. In my 10 years kind of working in the club business a little bit, I've learned that many leaders in the club business rely on their IQ, their intelligence and the IQ, their TQ, their technical aspects of their jobs. And there's a lot of smart club people, and there's a lot of club leaders that are great in the technical aspects of the job. But the IQ and TQ, the emotional, the intellectual intelligence and the technical intelligence is important, but the most important part of leadership is this EQ. It's the emotional intelligence. It's leading from the heart. And Catie's the world's leader in this emotional intelligence, and she's going to spend the next hour teaching us how to truly connect the head and the heart, how to truly be a heart-led leader, and utilizing our emotional intelligence to lead people to serve others. Here's my dear friend, Catie Hargrove, and we're in for a great treat.
Thanks, Tommy, and good morning to everyone. I'm super excited to be here with you today. I think if you look in the chat, there's a note from Beth that just says, this is supposed to be a conversation. And so what this isn't is a presentation where you have to wait to the end to ask questions. What I would love is for all of you to ask questions as we go. So Tommy and Beth are going to help flag them for me. Do not be afraid to ask me to go back, to ask a question. Everything is on the table. I want to share as much as I can with you today. So as Tommy said, emotional intelligence is one of my areas of expertise. It's truly the thing that I love the most to talk to leaders about, or anybody who's intending to be a leader. I think it is one of the most crucial skills as a leader. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why that is. We're also going to talk this morning about the fundamentals. So really, what is emotional intelligence? Let's level set on what we're talking about when Tommy says it's the EQ, which is different than your technical ability and different from your intellectual ability. So what do we really mean by emotional intelligence? And then I also want to share some tips, tricks, tools about developing emotional intelligence over time. This is both for you and for your team. So unless there's any questions, we're going to dive right in. I'm just going to keep rolling through, but please, please, please start dropping questions in the chat as soon as you have them. And I'd love to just invite you, as you're sitting in your space this morning, to not think that you know everything about emotional intelligence because you've heard about it before. What I find is that a lot of people are a bit clueless, or they've only read the headlines. And I want to give you that next level bit of information, because Tommy has told me how important all of your roles are and how much he loves all of you. And he said, Catie, I want them to know what you and I have been teaching people for years. And so the invitation is kind of park what you've already known, park a little bit about things that might sound familiar. Let's talk about how to really integrate this to make you even better supporters of your team and even better supporters of your members. And I truly believe that leadership is a skill that we develop over time, but emotional intelligence is such an interesting topic for me because it's distinct from your IQ. Your IQ is something that has a set point. You basically get to a point where it's not to say that you don't continue to learn things, but your ability to comprehend over time is set at 7, 8, 9 years old. Emotional intelligence is one of the areas that you can develop over time, that you can constantly change. And so if you stop changing, if you stop working and developing yourself, you're completely finished. And so I know that you're here because you're hungry for information and you really are committed to this development. So I love that that's the space that we're in. We're also in this space. So 718 days. It was 718 days ago that the federal government, United States, said we're going through a complete shutdown because of the pandemic. And I put this up here because for some groups that I work with, it's like, yeah, we've been on lockdown and we've been working from home and everything's remote. You all are the opposite. You have not. You've been on. There's some good in that. You've been able to, Beth was telling me all these amazing stories of how you've been pouring into your members, how you've been transforming your businesses, how you really taken the people and the services that you've offered, and then you've expanded it just to support the people who are members of your club. It's remarkable. And what I'm also finding, no matter if you're in an industry like yours where you've been on, or you've been remote or disconnected or hybrid in that way, these last 718 days have really ground down people in lots of different ways. So we keep hearing about burnout. We keep hearing about, people resigning and just changing jobs or not even having a job. The world of work is very, very strange right now. And what we see, though, is people who are still in the workplace, they're at a point where because they're burnt out, because they're tired, because they've been on, and that, quite frankly, is probably most of you who are on here today, that can wear at our ability to be emotionally intelligent. So part of what I want to share with you today, too, is deeper practices that are more helpful right now to bring some resilience back into your person and into your team. So before the pandemic, I used to read, I still do, all of these different magazines, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc., Fast Company, Wall Street Journal, all of them. These were the headlines. This is about a year or two before the pandemic. So think like 2018, 2019. This is what you would see. And so I'm like, yeah, I know this. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. Now, towards the tail end of pandemic, this is what today's narrative are. Interpersonal relationships, emotional awareness, executive communication, all functions of emotional intelligence. Empathy, resilience, creativity, all a function of emotional intelligence. So the skills that were deemed as critical for leaders to have before the pandemic are even more so critical now. But they're not necessarily just talking about emotional intelligence. What you see here is they're talking about like the smaller components of that. And that's where people start to get tripped up because they start to say, well, how do I develop empathy? What do you really need to do to develop resilience? How do I help my people be more resilient? What do you do to manage your emotions? Doesn't everybody know how to do that? So what I'd love to do with you today is go a little bit deeper to give you some sort of like behind the scenes, a little bit more of the scientific knowledge so that when you're trying to implement programs for yourself to take better care of yourself, or implement programs for your team or for your members, that you've got some more specificity around what does it really take to develop empathy? What does it really take to better manage your emotions? And another reason why I believe this is so important is there's research behind the the fact that 75% of careers are derailed when leaders or just individual contributors do not have effective skills to manage themselves from an emotional perspective. And I know that you've all seen this before. Everyone who's probably sitting in this room, highly successful, you keep going up the ladder, you're achieving great things. But we all know colleagues, former colleagues, who have not been able to cut it. And it's because they have a temper, because they're not kind to their colleagues, or they're not kind to members. They blow up at people. They're just not able to effectively manage themselves. And it's a nuance, right? They might be like technically doing their job, but the way in which they do it does not contribute to the kind of culture that you're trying to create and the experience that you're trying to create for the people that are members and guests of your clubs. And so this is why I believe this is so important too, is it's a skill that, one, you can continue to improve on over time, but it is critical to your long-term success. And that equates to earning potential, and then certainly things like member retention and general workplace satisfaction. So when people talk about culture and they talk about engagement, emotional intelligence is an underlying contributor to that. And that can be really great if you have a high level of emotional intelligence. It can also be your downfall if you don't. All right, so let's talk fundamentals. Let me give you, again, a more of a common definition of emotional intelligence, so that when we're talking about it, and then when you all are talking about it with your teams, that you have a common, standard, understanding of what EQ is. So I'm going to break it down for you, and then we're going to go into, so then how do you develop this over time? And how do I work this with my team? And how does this really dovetail with what I'm seeing with my team and that sort of thing? Okay, so here on the slide, this is what I am, when I'm talking about emotional intelligence, this is what I mean. It's really a set of emotional and social skills that collectively establish how well we think about ourselves, how we perceive ourselves as a good person, as a confident person, our ability to express ourselves in a constructive way, not blowing up at people, not withholding emotions, not tampering them, but effectively expressing them when it's appropriate. Developing and maintaining social relationships, and not the hey Bill, how's it going? Yeah, what'd you do this weekend? Okay, bye. Talking about emotionally based relationships, meaningful relationships. Using emotional information in a meaningful way. This one is the super secret skill that I want to make sure that you all hone in on today. This is the one that, as a leader and as somebody who's trying to help affect this in an organization, this is the one that will, instantly change your culture and instantly increase your ability to connect with both your team and with members and guests. And then the last is to cope effectively with challenges, with stress, and to solve problems. And not just the everyday making decisions kind of thing. I'm talking about when something's on the line, when it's a very big deal, when it's an emotionally based decision, or when stress hits, but it's an overwhelming amount of stress just based on what's happening in the world, or what's happening with your team, or what's happening in your area. So emotional intelligence, fundamentally, this is what I'm talking about. So there's 5 different then sub layers under that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a taste of what that looks like. Not because you have to memorize it all or you have to use it all at the same time. I'm going to share the next level of information so that you can start to be more precise about how you apply skills to improve your emotional intelligence. It's very difficult when someone says, just manage your emotions better. What's that about? Or, you should be thinking of yourself differently, or just you need to be better under stress, or you need to be more flexible. It's I don't know how to do that. So let's go a click deeper, because this is what you won't get. This is what you won't get if you're reading an article on Forbes. This is not what you're going to get in the Wall Street Journal. Okay, so your self-perception is comprised of 3 different components. Your self-regard. So this is, I respect myself, I like myself, and I have self-confidence. Second is self-actualization. This is, I set my own goals. I chart my own course, even within an organization, versus I'm just going to wait for somebody to set my targets, or I'm going to wait for somebody to give me what our goal is or what our numbers are, and then I'll set my goal against that. So self-actualization is, I choose, I'm self-directed about how I go about my life. And the third is emotional self-awareness. This is a really important one. Understanding your own emotions. And not just saying, this is what I think I feel. It's knowing truly what you feel and knowing what you feel in the moment. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you train for that, because it's a very nuanced skill, but once you master that skill, it's data on yourself that allows you to make better decisions about how you want to behave. But you got to like feel the feeling, understand what it is, and then you have to decide what to do. So we'll talk a little bit about how do you really kind of hone and develop that skill. But this is just the first element, self-perception, understanding your own emotions. The second is self-expression. So effectively expressing your emotions, like in an appropriate way. So the first one is just that, constructive expression of your own emotions. So this is, again, not holding back when something should be shared, not blowing your top because you bottled something up and now you're just angry and you want to rage or you want to yell. And it's also making sure that you're not overly gushing about something, like you just want to make sure that it's appropriate for the situation that you're in. So being able to navigate that. Your assertiveness, you're communicating beliefs that you have in an effective way, so that you can be passionate about something, but you're not righteous about it. So passion is good. Righteous is not, right? Righteous is like, ugh. Passion's like, oh, wow, gosh, tell me more. And independence, this is a good one. This is one that is, again, especially for your industry. Being able to have your emotional state be separate from the emotional state that's happening around you. So a great example is you've got a member who is like irate about something, and you are kind of waiting in the wings and you come up upon the situation. You don't get irate too, right? That you don't need to take on their emotional state. So your ability to not take on the emotional state of someone else. Or if morale seems to be down, that your morale doesn't have to be down just because your colleagues is. So this is a very important one within an organization, because you want to make sure that your emotional state belongs to you and that you are independent of what other people are doing. All right, so this is expressing yourself. The next gets into the people parts. This is where we start to connect with others. So interpersonal is really how you develop and maintain relationships over time. So the first is like really having mutually satisfying, emotionally based relationships. Now, this could be with spouse, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend, sibling, parents. Like those are where we typically develop our emotionally based, mutually satisfying relationships. They also can take place in the workplace too. I love the person that actually all the senior leadership in the firm that I work for, love them. And I tell them that all the time, and they say the same thing to me. We've developed that over time, but you can also have that in the workplace. Empathy. This is one that gets people tripped up a ton because it gets confused with sympathy. Empathy is really understanding and appreciating how somebody else feels, even if you're not going through the same situation. So I've never had, for example, a parent that's died, but I have several friends who have. I have empathy for them, not because I've gone through the same thing, but I can imagine what it would feel like to lose one of my parents. It would be awful to me. And so I can relate to them on that level. I don't have to take that on or feel depressed or sad or anything else about that. I can if I want to. But it's really about understanding the emotional state of somebody else and finding a way to connect with that. The last is social responsibility. It's really it's working for a cause. It's doing purposeful action to take care of community. Community could be everything from your own family. It can be your workplace, right? The members, the guests, all of the team. It could be where you live in Florida. It could be the country, all sorts of things. But it's really having an emotional connection to and a responsibility to take care of others. Okay, so this is the interpersonal. Again, this is where we start to relate to people. Decision making. So this is about how you use emotions to make better decisions, but it's also when you're making emotionally based decisions. Okay, so you make decisions all day long, but this is when, again, the stakes are high. So when the stakes are high, your ability to effectively solve a problem, right? Are you shooting from the hip? Are you able to slow things and calm things down to make a good decision that you can stand by forever? Reality testing, really being objective and seeing the world for what it is. So sometimes, I'm sure you know people, that you've worked with before, or maybe somebody on the team now that's like Chicken Little. The sky is falling. Oh my gosh, everything's awful. And you kind of have to talk them off the ledge before you can move forward. So reality testing is being able to see, like almost like separate yourself from the emotional stuff that's happening to be able to say, okay, so how do we solve this problem? Like there's a fire over there. Do we panic or do we say, all right, so how are we going to get water over there and how do we fix that? And then impulse control, the ability to resist or delay impulses. And this is one in the workplace that I see gets tripped up, that trips up people all the time. I'm working with a leader right now who, when he gets upset about something, has a hard time not firing off an email. And he does it to me, he does it to his colleagues, and it's really undermining his credibility. And this is a man who's a medical doctor. He's brilliant, brilliant person, technical skills off the charts, intellectual skills off the charts, emotional intelligence skills. We're working on it. It's not great. It's not great. So your ability to like hold yourself back, really check everything before you decide to push out and make a decision. Okay, so you know that old advice of like, just sleep on it, it's a really good one. And the reason why that adage is so important is if you have a weak impulse control, it allows you to just take a step back. Sometimes waiting even an hour, 15, 20 minutes can make a huge difference in your ability to make a more effective decision. So this is an important one to develop over time. And the last one, here's a bad lie for you, stress management. So your ability to cope with challenges, your flexibility, your ability to adapt to change. Now, this gets people tripped up because I work with people all over the world, right? All leaders, thousands of leaders every year. And they'll say, Catie, I'm very flexible. We're changing all the time. The world changes all the time. And the fact of the matter is, adults, way more than children, do not like change. Like we'll do it, but we don't like it. And a great example that I'll use is when your phone updates and people say, oh, I got a phone update and now I got to put passwords in. Now I got to do all these security things. And I had it all set up the way I liked it. Now I got to fix it again. And then I'll say, how much do you really like change? So it's your ability to be flexible when something doesn't really sit right with you, when it doesn't really feel great. So your ability to roll with it no matter what. All of us, or the majority of us, always come along with organizational decisions, with changes, massive world changes, like, I don't know, a global pandemic. But this is not just saying I'm dragging myself through it, but really embracing it, even though it doesn't necessarily feel great. Stress tolerance is your ability to manage stress, and this is over time, and successfully cope with stress so that you're actively doing something with it so it doesn't stay stuck in your body. So it does not coming out in negative ways against your team, like in yelling or in being passive aggressive, and that you're not burning yourself out or making yourself physically ill because of how you're managing things. And so stress tolerance is an interesting one because, again, all of us are dealing with stressful situations all the time. I know that you are. I absolutely am too. But it's like, how are you doing it? Is it wearing you out? Are you getting sick? Are you really effectively showing up for your team in the way that you want to? Or are you just like just weathering it and hoping that it'll go away? And I'll tell you that one of the things that I'm seeing in every single industry that I'm working in right now is stress is one of the #1 reasons why people are burning out. And it's not because we didn't know how to deal with stressful situations before, but we are like all living in a chronic state of stress, whether it's being on for the last 700 some odd days and never really getting a break from your seasons the way you typically would, or it's just not finding ways to personally work stress through. So it's not stuck on you. And it's one of those things that stress is interesting. Like when the pandemic started, everybody was like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And then you all are shining examples of, we just did other things. We served our members differently. We took care of our team members differently. We changed the way that we operated to make sure that we could make things work. That's great. And it starts to get old. And then when you add in all the other things that are happening in the world, so political stress, social unrest, we had almost 1 million people in the country die from COVID. Exponentially, that many more people have been impacted by COVID negatively as well. myself included. And so when you start to layer all those things, and then you have more member demands, you have more organizational demands, you have board members who also have an opinion and things to do, and you start to keep, we haven't had relief for almost 800 days of all of that. So people's right now, their ability to manage stress is actually really low, is what I'm finding. And then optimism, having a positive outlook. And this is not like Pollyannish, it's having a realistic positive outlook that we've done hard things before, we can do hard things again. All right, so I'm going to pause there and see what questions come to mind, because I want to start talking about how do you develop emotional intelligence over time, but I want to make sure that we're all solid on some of those concepts that I just walked through. So I'm going to pause for a second. What questions does this bring up, or what are the kinds of things that you're really interested in understanding about how to help yourself or how to help your team? What's on your mind? Delivering stressful messages. This is good. Okay, we're going to talk about that, Rob. Thank you for being gold star, for being number one. First in, we'll talk about that for sure.
Catie, I was going to ask if everybody was able to take one thing or one of these development points from today, because it's a building process and you don't get these every day. What's the first one you would do?
Oh, that's hard. So what I'd actually invite everyone to do is, as I was talking through all of those, I'm sure each of you went, I'm not so strong in that one. That's not a good one for me. And so it would be to focus just in that area. What I do know about developing emotional intelligence over time is that if you make gains in like one, maybe two areas, and we'll talk about how to do that in a second, but if you make gains in one or two areas, it actually increases your ability to do some of those other things as well. So it's a great question, Beth. All right, I'm going to keep rocking. I would love to see some more questions come in. I'm going to start giving you a little bit more insight again about how do we develop our emotional intelligence over time. It's important to understand like what blocks people's ability to be emotionally intelligent. One of the first ones that we're not going to dive into on this call, actually I would say the first two, untreated mental health challenges. So one of the, I think, bright spots coming out of the pandemic is that we have more and more people accessing mental health resources than ever before. And the way that healthcare is changing too, there are more and more resources available to people, which is awesome. Same thing with unresolved trauma, things that have happened in your past that you just never really dealt with. And that could be anything. Trauma is the definition of trauma is pretty wide. I have these two on here specifically because I know there are a number of leaders, like really senior leaders on this call. And one of the things that I've been recommending to every single CEO that I work with, and think very large companies, when they're trying to figure out how do we help emotional health in the workplace? How do we help with psychological safety? One of the first things I remind them is you all have health insurance. You offer health insurance to your people. It looks different in every organization, but you offer some sort of help. It's actually reminding people about what resources that they have to access. So for a lot of them, they haven't talked to their people after they onboard about, here are all your health benefits, here are all your dental benefits, or whatever. What are the things that you provide as an organization? If you provide these kinds of resources, it's important to remind everyone that they're available. So this is like having a lawyer that you know before you actually need to have a lawyer, like somebody that you know that you could call if you got into a jam and you needed some help. This is the same sort of thing. And so raising awareness that, hey, we want you to be using all your health benefits. This is an important thing for you to do. But one of the things that I find for people is they'll get to a set point in their emotional intelligence, and if they're not dealing with things that are happening, and even just the last 2 years and the stress of it all constitutes as trauma for a lot of people. And so if you're sitting here going, that might be me, or maybe I haven't tried using a therapist or a counselor or someone who is a licensed professional this would be a time to potentially do that. And so I was working just yesterday, with a person who runs a very large financial services retirement company. And this is one of the things that he landed on and said, I need to go and do this. I've got stuff from my past that's like making it so it's blocking him from being a better leader. And he's one of the best. He's one of the best that I work with right now. So that's number one. Those are like the first two things, but we're not going to dig into that. So it's just like my PSA to say, help your people out and make sure that they know the resources that are available to them. That will help their overall emotional intelligence in the workplace. Okay, we talked a little bit about chronic stress. So finding ways to deal with stress is going to be really important. Underdeveloped habits and routines. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's really about, I'm just winging it. I'm just showing up at work and I'm just doing whatever I'm asked. I'm living by my calendar. I've got meetings there and I just go all day. And I just handle requests as they come versus owning your life, owning your calendar, owning and really planning for how you go about your day and your week. Taking the time to take ownership of that can be a game changer for anybody in a leadership role, or if you were somebody who is like aiming to become a leader in your organization, mastering this skill sooner than later is going to make you unstoppable. Little to no self-inquiry practices. I'm going to get to that in a second, but I'm talking about things like meditation, mindfulness, journaling. If you're not spending time really thinking about or doing a scan of what your emotional state is, it's really hard to then say, well, how do I just get better? If you don't know what your emotional state is, how do you actually give yourself a baseline to build off of? And the last one is absence of feedback. And so for anybody on this call who is a people leader, or anybody on this call who has a manager or somebody that they report to, the absence of feedback about how you're showing up, and sometimes that's like performance and numbers, and then also sometimes, as we know, it's style and mannerism and affect and just people's way of coming into the workplace. Absence of feedback means that I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and I'm not going to change. What I want for all of you to be doing is behaving more like a scientist, behaving more like a detective. We'll get to that in a second, but really, you need to be getting sources of input and feedback from people about how you're showing up in order to change. So you can do all the self-scan and plans all you want on yourself. That's great. You have to do that. You should also be, if you're not delivering feedback on a consistent basis about how your team is showing up, put this on your to-do list. If your manager is not giving you consistent feedback about how you're showing up, put that on your to-do list to have a conversation with him or her about getting some input, because you really want to know this. This is really an essential part of developing your emotional intelligence over time. And when we're not managing our emotional intelligence, what we see, especially in the workplace, is something that I love to call it's called the drama triangle. I did not come up with it. It's been out since the early 70s, but this is one of those like secret things that's been around for forever that I like to unearth for people. When you're not managing your emotional intelligence, this is what happens in the workplace. You see people show up in negative ways, not because they're trying to, but because they're not managing themselves effectively. So as leaders, you're trying to assess, like, what is the emotional state of my workplace? Or I'm seeing behaviors from people that are weird or toxic, and I'm not really sure what I'm seeing. I want to give you some language to like name exactly what you think you might be seeing, because then that gives you some clues about what you should do about it. So right now, especially when people are under stress, they're burnt out, we see them show up in one of three negative ways. One of them is the rescuer. So on the surface, this person looks like one of the most helpful people on your team, right? So if you're struggling, they'll say, oh, I'll take that off your plate. Hey, let me help you. Oh, yeah, that's great. Oh, poor you. Gosh, it's such a shame that this is happening. Oh, yeah, I can see that you're so stressed. So it kind of feels nice when somebody recognizes that I might be overwhelmed, or when they offer to help. What they want to do, though, over time is make themselves useful to you by rescuing you. So it allows them to continue to bring that negativity and that sense of stress and overwhelm and awfulness and live in that. It makes them useful and connects them to you. So again, helpfulness it's a very important skill. It's a very important part of people's culture. And I know that many of you are like, Catie, we do that. Of course, that's what we do. It's when it becomes toxic, when it becomes like people just want to live in the drama of, oh gosh, everything's so hard, let me help you. So it's not from a sense of just like, this is what we do because we're a family. It's this is what I do because I'm going to keep you in the struggle with me. The second thing that we see is the persecutor. So people who want to blame everyone, want to tear everyone down. I think we've all seen enough videos online of people that are deemed Karens or Chads. If your name is Karen or Chad, I don't know how you've been managing the last 2 years, but it's really the people who just want to blame everybody else for whatever the problem there is. So, you know, my dinner's not great. It's because we're short-staffed. I don't like this. And it's people who just want to point fingers. So if they have a finger pointed out somewhere, this is the person that is blaming everyone else. Instead of what we're hoping to build in organizations, which is people taking ownership, right? Owning their emotional state, owning the ability to solve problems. And so this happens. When we get under stress, it's like, I can't control any of this. This is all out of my control. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of things in the last few years have felt very out of control. And where I know that many of you have found success is by taking ownership and control of the situation and finding a way out. Continuing to model that behavior allows you to see where the persecutors are and to curb that behavior pretty quickly, or this might not be somebody who belongs on your team long term. The beauty of what you've all been able to do is you've been able to pivot and innovate, but you can't do that when you have a bunch of persecutors on your teams. These are people you got to kind of weed out. The last are victims. Oh, poor me, everything is happening to me. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I expected. People playing the victim. And so we've all been there, right? We've all felt like, oh gosh, nothing's just going right. Everything bad happens to me. We've all been in a spot, right, where we just feel down in that just lowest point. The problem is when people don't ever come out of that point. So as emotionally intelligent leaders, it's important to spot when people are doing this to help them slow down and start to think through how can you take some agency and ownership over what's happening. And to also objectively see that, like, it's not all happening to you. Sometimes it's happening to everyone, or they're just taking it all in and directing attention towards themselves versus saying, I'm going to own this, or I'm going to manage it, or I'm going to find a way to effectively deal with it. So I bring this up. I share this with a lot of leaders. It's very important as you're trying to do a scan of like, where are there problems in the organization? This is all an emotionally based concept. So where are there problems, and how do I spot what the specific problem is, which gives you clues on how to manage it. All right, so I do have some insights and things to share with you about how to better support your team. But what I tell everyone who wants to know more how to be a better emotionally intelligent leader is I think about when I fly all over the country to do my work. You know, one of the things that you hear at the beginning of the flight is, you know, if oxygen masks pop down, secure your own oxygen mask before assisting other people. And I love that concept when it comes to developing executives, developing leaders, but in particular around emotional intelligence. You can't influence emotional intelligence in the workplace with your team unless you're putting your own oxygen mask on first. When you do that over time, you will increase your ability to just own and drive yourself and your emotions in a way that also allows you to be a better detective of what's happening with other people. And this concept is really around slowing down to speed up. So the way that you help develop your own emotional intelligence is to slow down. Now, I don't mean to slow down on all the deliverables and the things that you have to do. That's like the technical part of your job. I'm talking about slowing yourself down, like internally, physiologically, and cognitively, so that you can better understand what's going on. So whether you think of a detective or a scientist, I want you to better understand what's happening to and in you, so that when you're trying to decide, what am I supposed to do? How do I want to behave? You can do things like deliver really challenging messages. You can do things, you have to fire people sometimes or let them go, or disappoint them that they're not going to get something that they wanted. All right, so when you slow down to speed up, you start to think about, what am I observing? So for yourself, language, So what you're saying, affect, how you look, how you're holding yourself, your mannerisms, right? Are you closed off or whatever, or are you like me and talk with your hands and you're open? Expressed feelings, am I sharing what's really happening inside of me? Yes or no? And then what are these context clues telling me? So for example, I know that if I'm not feeling well, if I'm stressed, if I've got some challenge going on, my expressed feelings are not going to be there. They're not going to be there. And that allows me to know, if I know that I'm not feeling great, it's like, well, anybody around me can see what's happening. Anybody around me can see what's happening. They'll know that I'm being quiet. They'll know that I'm not being expressive. They'll see that I'm not moving a lot. So what is that? So what's that telling other people? But what's it telling me? Maybe that I need to stand up and move. Maybe that I need to go take a walk around the block. Maybe that I need to kind of do a scan and reset a little bit. When you're working with other people, how can I relate to what I'm noticing? So if you see somebody who's normally like affable and energetic and enthusiastic, and they come in one day and they're absolutely not, there's no judgment there. I know what that's like. You know what that's like. So how can I relate to what I'm seeing? That's where the empathy piece comes in. And then what questions could I ask to understand more? So so this is great to do for yourself, but this is also great to do with other people. So when people say, how do you develop empathy? How do I really get more emotional data to know what to do? Like, go into detective mode. So what is the language that people are using? What does their affect look like? What kind of mannerisms do they typically do? What are they doing right now? And every kind of mannerisms, people who are flicking their pen or picking at their cuticles or snapping their fingers or wrenching their hands or clenching their fists. If you spend time in detective mode like Sherlock Holmes and really become a student of observation of human behavior, we're giving off data all the time. If you're sitting in a room with other people right now and you just like look up, go away from the screen and like look at each other, tons of data, right? So go into detective mode. Are they sharing emotionally based language or not? If they're not, you don't know how they're feeling, you're going to guess. So what are these context clues telling you? How can I relate to that? And if you can't relate to it because you're like, I just don't know. And I don't even know what they're feeling. I'm not really sure. Then what questions could I ask to understand more? Because when you understand the data, then you can make better decisions. Usually what happens is there's like, I know Catie, I've worked with her for years. And I kind of gloss over things. What I'm asking you to do is slow down. So when you're thinking about delivering a hard message, when you're thinking about, I'm going to have to make a very difficult decision, I'm going to have to try and energize my team to go over and beyond because we have a massive event this weekend and we can't screw it up. What questions could I ask to understand what is the true emotional state in the room or with this other person? When you understand that emotional state, you can do something different. All right, so I wanted to include the top 5 emotional intelligence accelerators. These are the things, there's many things that you can do to improve your emotional intelligence over time. But I also thought that it was important to surface some things that I've been seeing over the last 2 years that have truly made a difference for people, just developing their own EQ and then helping their team to do the same. So here are the top 5. The first one is consistent rhythms and routines. This is probably the number one thing that I find that leaders are really suffering with right now, that they are not flying by the seat of their pants necessarily, but they don't feel in control of their calendars, of their weeks, of their schedule, and of what's happening. I'm not here to suggest that you should be like tight and control everything, but to feel like you have a little bit more ownership then allows you to feel like things aren't happening to you. So you don't get yourself in the drama triangle when you don't actually want to be there. So having consistent rhythms and routines, I'm going to send you all in a follow-up note. I'm going to send everybody just a tool that I use about planning your ideal day and week and month and working backwards from that. So if you feel like, gosh, I'm out of control, I'm having a hard time with that, and I feel like I'm never getting ahead, this is one of the first things you can do. Block off time on your calendar, pick a day of the week, put yourself in a room with no other devices or Wi-Fi, and sit there and think about, if I could design my ideal day, what would I do? What would it look like? And I'm not talking Pollyannish like I'm sitting on a beach and I don't have to work anymore. I'm talking about in your role, with what you are responsible for, how can I take more ownership and control over that? So I'm going to send you some tools and resources of how to do it. And if you need some additional help, I'll give you my contact information so you can phone a friend. I'd love to help you walk through that. The second one is meditation. If this is something that you're like, it's not really my thing, or I've tried it and it's hard, I've tried it and it didn't work, I've tried it and it really, I'm not sure if I was doing it right. There are lots of tools and resources that you can use right now. Some of them are free, some of them are pretty low cost to teach you how to meditate. And going along with the concept of slowing down to speed up, meditation allows you to do a number of things. One, it invites you to do a scan of your emotional state and also your physiological state, because the head, the heart, everything, we're all connected, right? It's not separate. We're all connected and wired together. So it allows you to do that scan, which will give you data about your current emotional state. It also trains your brain and your body at the same time to slow down in the moment on purpose when you want it to. So if you think about a member who's rushing up to you because there is an emergency, or somebody who barges into your office because they're in a crisis, do you want to be in a frenetic pace, or do you want to slow down so that you can do all this detective stuff? I'm going to slow it down. So meditation can allow you to, on purpose, on command, slow yourself down so that you can receive what's happening around you. You can take in all the data and you can make really effective decisions. Even though you're not going to be in a meditative state while you're working, what it does is it trains your brain and your body to be able to do it when you want to, not to drop into meditation, but to slow it down. Okay, so it's taking control of yourself, to not just to manage your own emotions, but to also help to manage the emotional state of what's happening around you. It's fascinating. You don't have to do it for an hour a day. You don't have to sit in a dark room. You don't have to cross your knees or anything else like that. It can be very simple. So I'm going to give you a couple of resources in a follow-up email of apps that you can use and different resources to try. This one is super powerful. The next one, movement, breath work, body work. So movement is anything from working out, going to the gym, however you want to exercise, but it's also walking. It's yoga, it's stretching, right? Body work are things like acupuncture and going and getting chiropractic care. So like getting somebody to physically work on you. And then breath work. So your breathing is one of the most powerful tools that you have control over in your body. Of all of your internal organs, brain aside, the rest of your internal organs, it's the only one that you can control. It works involuntarily, like you're breathing right now and not thinking about it. And it works voluntarily, like you can hold your breath, you can slow your breath, you can speed it up if you want to. So when crisis happens and emotions start to run high, your body and your brain start to go into autopilot. Your heart rate slows down, you go into fight, flight, or freeze, and you're kind of in this funky alert state. One of the only things that can pull you out of that when you want it to is breathing. So your breathing slows down when you're in a crisis state. Your heart rate increases, your breathing slows down. And the one way to pull yourself out of that and tell your body, no, we don't need to crisis right now. We need to focus and we need to think and we need to take in all this information. You can do that through breathing. So I know that many of you have spas and other kind of fitness facilities on site. You often have people who come in and teach classes and do instruction. This would be a great opportunity to tap into some of those folks to do, a very simple session on breathing exercises. I'll also send some resources as well that you can find for free on YouTube that teach you how to breathe. Yes, you know how to breathe. You've been doing it since you were a baby. And at the same time, this is about controlling it to slow down the impulse to react and maybe do it a little irrationally versus doing it in a controlled manner. So being able to control your body so that you can tap into the right emotions to make really great decisions. Journaling is another one. I'll send you a bunch of ideas about that. It doesn't have to be Dear Diary. Here's what my day was like. I hung out with Tommy and Catie and Beth, and it was amazing. Not that. It's just like taking all the stuff that's in you and dumping it out on a page. So it could be a huge narrative. It could be bullet points. It could just be a couple of words. It could be 2 lines. Doesn't need to be anything except for a helpful resource to get information out. I do know a lot of people who will go back and read the stuff that they've written because it gives you emotional cues about what's happening for you. So if you're struggling a little bit about like, am I really tapping into my emotions and what are they really? Journaling can be a great way to do it. For me, I pick it up and put it down. When I get into high stress situations, it's when I do a lot of journaling. When I'm at homeostasis, I might park it aside a little bit. I feel good. But when stuff starts to build up inside, and we all know what that feels like, journaling is a great way for me just to dump it out. The last one is movies and TV. So I hope some people are like, yes, that's a fun one. I do that all the time. But do it in a way to get you into detective or scientist mode. Take like, back of an envelope and a pencil, watch, not reality television, but watch like a no kidding movie or one of those like series like Yellowstone, right? Something. Ted Lasso. Take notes on the emotions that you're seeing characters play. Pick a character. So Ted Lasso is one of my favorites at the moment. Watch him and write down in one 30-minute episode, just short and sweet, all the different emotions that you see him express. And then watch the next episode and do this over and over again. What you're training your brain to do is like, when I see it and I hear it, I know what that is. I can name it. When you can see, hear, and then name the emotion, it's the right amount of data for you as a leader and as a great teammate to be able to say, okay, here's what I think I should do next. So it's slowing it down to then be able to speed up in real time, being able to do this like this. You won't have to think about it. It starts to become really natural, but in order to build it, you need to practice. So these are 5 very high impact. They're low effort, meaning none of these should take you more than 20 or 30 minutes in a day. These are all things that I would recommend adding into your week if you're not currently doing it. And that first one, consistent rhythms and routines, let's go ahead and do that. That will help you figure out, so how do I fit in meditation? How do I fit in some body work? Or when is a good time for me to journal? All right, so this is our last slide. I know we're close to time here. I'd love to see if there's any other questions, comments, things that you're curious about, any other resources that I can share with you with the time that we have left. Just go ahead and drop it into the chat. Can I recommend books on EQ? Yes, I'll send a few forward. There's one in particular. I'll send 2 different ones. One is going to be super nerdy. So if you like to see lots of like different research and scientifically based stuff, I can send that, and I can give you another one that's a little bit lighter of a read. That's a faster read that can help you with that too. I'll send you the name, title, and the link on Amazon. So great question. Thank you, Lauren. Other questions, other things that you're curious about, or something that you went, I didn't know that, or wow, this is something I might be able to try. Is there a password for the Survey Monkey? Yes, there is. I believe it's shift with a capital S and then lowercase HIFT. What other questions? Other kinds of resources? Allie, thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, shift is the password. Thank you, Michael. All right, as Beth said, I am going to follow up with an email. Beth will follow up with an email, but I'll have the slides. It'll have additional resources, and then you'll have my contact information as well. So if you've got additional questions, or sometimes we get a lot of information and you got to work through your day, and then you go to sleep at night, and tomorrow you might have an aha or like, oh gosh, I should have asked about this. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share whatever I know. I love Tommy, and he's, again, said so many wonderful things about you all. I'd love to help in any way I can.
Catie, thank you so much for being our first presenter for our Heart-Led Leader webinar series. I know all the club leaders are knee-deep in busy season, and just want to wish everyone the best of luck. Catie, thank you for sharing your heart and all this great information on emotional intelligence. We'll join you all on April 13th for rock and roll legend JJ French, Twisted Sister, and a message called Twisted Business. Password is SHIFT, SHIFT. Thanks again, Catie. And thank you also for Beth Sargent, my partner, putting this webinar series together. Have a great month and happy Ash Wednesday. God bless.